Well, welcome back. We talked a little bit about potting soil in the last segment and kind of alluded to getting soil or what you put in your deal if you didn't buy potting soil. But I want to talk a little bit about compost and type of soil to get and how much to amend it and things like that. Of course, I would recommend everyone get a compost pile or start developing a compost pile. Especially if you've got the room and you know you're going to be container gardening or doing any kind of gardening. We've got so many leaves and so much just everything that can be put in a compost pile around here that that's really good. If you have a good compost pile, you're way ahead of the game. If you don't know how to do it, we've got fact sheets. You can get on the web and just type in how to make a compost pile. Seems like everybody in the world is giving recommendations on it. A lot of the recommendations are extremely good. Some of them are a little bit more expensive than you might like to pay, but compost is a really good thing, and if you've got that, you're way ahead of the game, mixing it in with your soil. I want to talk a little bit about what types of soil to use and not to use. Of course, in this area, we're probably not going to have much sand, so any type of ground that you get is probably going to be considerably more clay. Maybe it's not clay, but it's more tight loam than what you would really like to have. The vermiculite and perlite will help that. They sell gypsum at some of the garden centers around, and it doesn't take, well, it takes a lot of that to loosen up the soil when you're talking about a garden, but when you're talking about a container garden, why a little of that goes a long way, and it will really cause the soil to break up pretty good. You want to make sure that you've got something that has not been standing in water, something like that. You don't want to go down there to that low spot next to the creek that's been flooded a lot of times, and usually it's standing in water, and now you're lucky that it's dried out enough, but it's washed down there, and you know that that's good stuff because it's washed down there. Having oxygen move through the soil is a good thing, and if it's been standing in water for a long time, or if it has had a lot of times when it's had water on it, kind of stay away from that. Of course, the more loamy that you can get, the better off you are. You're going to want the soil to be able to get the water through it, and so however you amend it or anything. Another thing to keep in mind is salt. That's one of those things that can creep up on you pretty easily, and if you do a lot of fertilizing and watering, there's a lot of salt that goes with some of that fertilizer. A lot of water wells have more salt in them than you'd like to have. If you can get water running through it that's good, fresh rainwater, that'll leach out some of those salts. But there can be times, and most of the crops that we grow in container gardening is real susceptible to just small amounts of salt. So make sure that you don't get salt in with some of the soil that you've got, and that's pretty easy to make that mistake. So make sure you get something that's already growing something good, not in a low-lying area, as much sand and loam as possible, amend it as much as you can. Now, the more clay your soil is, the more you're going to need something in the bottom of your container to kind of get it moved on through. A little bit of gravel or sand or something so that you can water, and it'll once it gets to the bottom of that container, it'll go ahead and make its way on out. Another thing I want to mention, this is some soil that has been used for a few years. Well, I say a few years, a couple of years. And you can find some old Osmocote mummies in here. And there's people that'll think, well, that fertilizer is still in there, so I didn't get much use out of it. But when you mash them, they're hollow, and just the outside part is left, and the rest of it has gone into solution and left. Once I got good potting soil or compost or something, why, I like to use it over and over. And the thing that I do is dump it out and stir it just like you would a compost pile, because oxygen is so much our friend when you're talking about something like this. If you can get it turned over during the winter, get it cold, get cold air into it, get oxygen into it, it'll be as good as new. Now, I say that. On the other hand, if you've had a problem, and say you had root rot in some plants, or if you had nematode damage, or for some reason that there was something that just kept stuff from growing, dump it somewhere and go get new. But if everything's grown good, compost is kind of hard to come by. It's awfully good stuff. If you've got good compost, don't throw it away or whatever. Dump it out, turn it over. These wheelbarrows, as far as I'm concerned, are probably not worth as much as this compost is, because it's some awfully good stuff. And if you've got good stuff that you're growing, take care of it and make good use of it. Say these wheelbarrows, a lot of people I've seen have used a wheelbarrow with a hole in the bottom of it as a container garden, and that works good. So there are just any number of ways to grow things in a container garden. If they're big enough, you plant the plants in them, take care of the water, and you should end up with as good a production as you could have with that same plant out there planted in some of the best soil.